Welcome back. The Central Bank of Nigeria, in a recent circular, updated its policy on internal capital generation and retention policy for Nigerian banks. In addition to the existing guidelines, an additional clause was set for banks' eligibility for dividend payments. Banks and discount houses with non-performing loans above 10% will no longer be allowed to pay dividends to their shareholders. Let's see how this regulation is viewed internationally. I'm being joined by the head of banking research, EcoBank Group, George Bodo. George Bodo is joining us from Nairobi. Good afternoon, Mr. Bodo. Thank you very much for coming through to us.
Good afternoon.
So how do you view this policy by Nigerian Central Bank that banks with NPL above 10% will not pay dividend? What does it tell about banking regulation in Nigeria?
Well, two things. Number one is that it's not the first time CBN is issuing such a circular. They first issued this circular in 2014. The second thing is that, broadly speaking, this is part of capital conservation best practice as well advanced by the Basel III. And they actually very specifically state that when capital adequacy ratios, especially what they call CET1, hit certain levels, that commercial banks' distribution of income to shareholders should be restricted. But also, more so to answer your question, is it shows how elevated banking regulation is in Nigeria. CBN rather, it's quite spot on when it comes to picking up some of these things.
Now, is this a confirmation that Nigerian banks have some very serious challenges when it comes to bad loans and capital adequacy ratio?
It's usually asset performance is cyclic. You go through periods of stress, you go periods of boom times. And so, actually, when I talk about Basel III, what they say that they established a capital conservation buffer, which is supposed to be funded by net earnings, and then they go ahead and state how you're supposed to fund your capital conservation buffer. The concept of capital conservation buffer is gravitates on the fact that bank performance are always cyclical, and what CBN is doing is that it's responding to this cyclicality and saying that over the last 2 years, deposit money banks in Nigeria have picked up a lot of, really not picked up, but they've had to reclassify a lot of non-performing obligors. And to recognize this fact is because usually asset non-performance tends to impair capital adequacy. So the best response from a regulatory perspective is in recognition of the cyclicality of asset performance is to restrict distribution of income to shareholders, which is exactly what they've done.
Okay, looking at Kenya where you are, what is the state of NPL and CAR in Kenyan banks and how is it being dealt with?
It's pretty elevated in Kenya and in East Africa in general. We are currently talking about in excess of 10%. We are 10% in Kenya. It's a bit high in Tanzania. It's above 10%. It's almost approaching 10% in Uganda. The response we've seen across this region is it's a bit twofold. Number one is in Uganda, we've seen the Central Bank come up with established a new capital, 2 additional capital conservation buffers on top of capital adequacy. In Kenya, there's been no response, but it's a hope that I think it's the regulators hoping that the implementation of IFRS 9 could take care of a number of these issues. And in fact, from our side, we expect distribution, dividend payouts to come down significantly in 2018, especially among Kenyan banks.
Okay, just before I let you go, Mr. Bodo, does this latest directive by the Central Bank change your outlook on Nigerian banks in 2018 and beyond?
I beg your pardon, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I was asking if this latest directive, if it changes your own outlook for Nigerian banks in 2018 and beyond.
No, it doesn't change. From a performance perspective, it doesn't change the outlook of Nigerian banks. But we do certainly expect payout ratios to drop a little in 2018, by a couple of basis points. Already, the top 10 banks that we follow in Nigeria, we've seen this payout ratios drop from 41% in 2015 rather, to 32% in 2016. In fact, top 5 banks have seen it drop significantly, all the way from 2014, and that's significantly driven by Fast Bank, which had no distribution in 2016. From a performance perspective, it doesn't change our outlook, but from a distribution perspective, we certainly have to factor in de-elevated payout ratios in 2016 rather than 2018 and beyond.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Bodo. George Bodo is the head of banking research with EcoBank Group. We'll move on now. In Kenya, the state-run electricity generating company KenGen plans to add 1,745 megawatts of electricity from geothermal sources by 2025. This is part of a government push to end power generation from fossil fuels.
Kenya has an installed generating capacity of 2,370 megawatts and peak demand of about 1,770 megawatts. Of this, KenGen, which is 70% owned by the government, has an installed capacity of 1,631 megawatts, with 533 megawatts from geothermal. Demand for electricity is growing at about 8% per year until 2020 and will rise to 9% in 2021, after which it will stabilize at 7%, according to the government's transmission and generation plan.
We have to make sure that every single Kenyan has power. That's the only way this nation will come out of poverty. And that's the bottom line. We have to generate as much power as possible, ensure that our energy per capita is competitive, just like the rest of the world. And that's the only way we can be able to attract industries, compete with China and other industrialized nations.
The East African nation is ramping up electricity production and investing in its grid to keep up with growing demand for power and to reduce frequent blackouts. It relies heavily on renewables such as geothermal and hydropower. KenGen is currently working on a 140 megawatt geothermal power plant known as Olkaria V, which is expected to be operational this year.
We also don't want to stretch the resource to the limit. So our conservative figure for Olkaria is 1,200 megawatts. If we get to that level, then it would be appropriate or prudent to observe the resource and see how it behaves from that production. Then we'll be able to have history matching to the numerical studies that we have done and be able to tell Kenyans whether we can add more power or not.
Kenya is ranked at number 37 worldwide by Ernst & Young's latest Renewable Energy Country Attractiveness Index issued in October. The Geothermal Resources Council ranks Kenya at number 8 worldwide in terms of installed capacity from geothermal.
And that's it on the program. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu.